welcome to yet another episode of Leaks and Lore. This is, patron. Oh, crap, I gotta sneeze already. I hate it when that happens. It disappeared. Alright, so continuing on. Welcome to another episode of Leaks and Lore. Patron exclusive. I wanted to talk about just 3 quick things because today is, hot D day, so I've got to set up for the live stream and get ready for the day, right? But 3 different things. First one being the battle in the gullet. Now, this will be something that will likely happen in season 3 or 4, right? So several years down the line. Speaking of which, let me know in the comments down below here. Do y'all think they're going to be able to deliver season 2 by 2023? I don't see that happening, but someone did comment on my video yesterday saying that it's potential. They said it was announced as official news, looked it up, and could not find it anywhere. So that was probably bullshit. But I mean, if they already started filming, they already started writing the season, maybe, but they haven't done that yet. So it's definitely not going to be coming out until at the earliest, springtime 2024. But anyway, battle in the gullet. So if you're unaware, what happens is, now I'm not going to reiterate every single detail because that would make this podcast longer. And also, that's really hard to recall off the top of my head. But what happens is, there are some warships that want to... So basically, when the war breaks out, Corlys takes his fleet and sort of annexes Blackwater Bay, right? He makes a line of his ships across the Blackwater Bay, cutting off trade, and any sort of ships that are already in King's Landing are stuck there, right? That's because it's held by the Greens, and the strategy-wise, it's one of the smartest things to do, right? So when that happens, I think initially at first Aegon and his camp wants to go and have the Greyjoys, specifically Dalton Greyjoy, take his fleet, the Ironborn fleet, around the bottom of Westeros and go and smash the Valyrian fleet, who's currently annexing King's Landing, right? So Dalton Greyjoy, being who he is kind of just I'll wait, right? There's some hatred between House Greyjoy and the Lannisters. The Lannisters are currently on, Jason Lannister, Tywin Lannister are in the Greens camps. Tywin Lannister is the master of laws, and Jason is the Lord of House Lannister, Lord of Castle Rock, and is one of the strong fronts for the Westerlands, for the Green camps, right? So Dalton Greyjoy is let me wait. Then he ends up hearing from the Blacks, and he starts basically working for Rhaenyra's side. So what ends up happening is Aegon II sends across the Narrow Sea. They sort of reach out to the Triarchy, because the Triarchy and Prince Admiral Craig Estrada, right, the crab feeder on the TV show, had not big fans of Daemon. Daemon kills him, he beheads him in the books, and then, he bodies him, he bisects him in the TV show. But that's what I was meaning when I was saying in the earlier videos, in my earlier videos on YouTube. What Daemon does in the Stepstone is going to come back to bite him in the ass. So Aegon successfully hires the Triarchy, and the Triarchy goes and smashes Corlys Velaryon's fleet in what's known as the Battle of the Gullet. So obviously, Jace, being, Prince of Dragonstone, Rhaenyra's oldest child, his dragon Vermax is savage, goes to battle, right? So what ends up happening is Jace flies through and burns the Triarchy fleet, right? In short, he does an amazing job. He literally forces the Triarchy in their fleet to their knees. But what ends up happening is that it's a big battle. There's a lot of ships. There's a lot of Triarchy ships. So when Vermax is flying through, just blowing out gouts of flames, she's burning the ships. Now there's obviously, with everything in the story, 3 different versions of it, but the one that makes the most sense, in my opinion, is that one of the Triarchy bowmen, right? So the Triarchy ships have these giant ballistas on them. It's the same thing that we saw in Game of Thrones season 8, that and also season 7, I believe. It's the thing that Qyburn shows Cersei will destroy the skull of Balerion, right? That's a ballista. It's basically a crossbow set on a stand that delivers a fucking pointy object at a very impressive speed and power, right? So these Triarchy ships have ballistas on them, and one of the Triarchy bowmen fires a bolt, and it embeds itself in Vermax's scales, because it initially clips Vermax's skin, but Vermax is going so fast and is such a powerful beast that it's the force behind Vermax flying makes the actual bolt from the ballista embed itself deeper into Vermax, and guess what? It's attached with a chain. So when Vermax flies off, supposedly one of its wings is ripped off, and it has a gash that's torn in its belly, and of course, it dies and falls into the sea. Pretty horrific imagery, I might add. But when that happens, Jace initially survives. It's over water, so Vermax wasn't, that high off the ground, so Jace survives and is just sort of floating there. And then what happens is Mirish, Triarchy bowmen, Mirish bowmen, they come up and they start firing arrows in Jace. And Jace just sort of dies. He takes a few of them, and then one takes him in the neck, and then he goes out. And it's pretty crazy. When you're reading that or when you're listening to that in Fire and Blood, it is tragic. It's hard to, listen to. I look forward to it on the TV show because it's not just one of the most tragic deaths of a dragon. Vermax, remember, we saw him in episode 5 in the Dragon Pit when they were training dragons. I believe that was episode 5. Might have actually been episode 6. But also an insanely tragic death of the rider. Because technically the Mirman and the Triarchy could have taken Jace, the Prince of Dragonstone, as a hostage. And and then literally ransomed him back to the Blacks for money. Because they don't really have ties in the Greens versus the Blacks, aside from the fact that they don't like Daemon and they're being paid by Aegon II to work for him. So it's really tragic. Could have been avoided. It's one of those events that makes you really go, oh damn, this is going to be hard to watch on screen. And I'm pretty sure the actor Harry Collette, who's playing him, I haven't seen him in really anything other than the few episodes he's been on the show, but I think he can pull it off. It's going to be amazing. It's going to be incredible and intense to watch, especially this is going to be after he spends all that time in the North. So his storyline is directly related to the North. He supposedly marries Sarah Snow, and he and her would make children of ice and fire. Technically, he's a child of ice and fire himself. The Strongs boast about their blood of the Firstmen. And the main reason being why is because technically where House Strong is in the Riverlands, most of the people around them, literally all of them, are Andals. So it's incredible that House Strong was able to survive all the way from the Firstmen and still have the blood of the Firstmen, which means they potentially have, wargs and greenseers and children of the Forest blood mixed in with them, and same with giant blood, which is what makes them so strong, right? So Jace, his father is of the Firstmen, and his mother, Rhaenyra, is of fire. So Jace is ice and fire himself, and their kids would be more ice and fire, but still, it's it's amazing. It's gonna be really tragic to watch him spend almost. I hope they do it right and they make him spend the majority of season 2 up there, and then he comes back to Dragonstone at the end. Obviously, he finds out about about Lucerys's death, and that's what ultimately makes him come back down south. But in the books, when he finds out about his death, he still supposedly, according to Mushroom, becomes best friends with Cregan Stark, and they hunt, hawk, fish, and he fucks Cregan's sister, Sarah Snow, and supposedly, according to Mushroom, they get married, so that's really cool. But then the other thing that I wanted to talk about, and this one's kind of equally as tragic, it's called the Brothel Queens. So in the chapter Rhaenyra Triumphant in Fire and Blood, she takes King's Landing. She holds for 6 months. She's known as the half-year queen. Also, she does a bunch of taxes, and she has this dude Bartimos Celtigar working for her. House Celtigar is from Valyria. They have the same features of House Velaryon, they just can't ride dragons, right? But House Velaryon and House Celtigar were in Westeros before the doom of Valyria, like House Targaryen, and for years, hundreds of years, they were able to fill their coffers off of the trade that would flow across the narrow sea. So it is kind of bullshit when Corlys, when the character Corlys is saying, to Daemon at the end of episode 2, look, my house had to build themselves up, I built my house Sorry, that got broken up by a timer. But it is kind of bullshit when Corliss's character says, I built my house wealth and the name and all that stuff off my own back. Well, not really, buddy. You're kind of like Drake in the sense that you started from mostly at the top and then you got to the tippity top, right? But anyway, that's besides the point. So House Celtigar will play a role in this show. I'm pretty sure we see Bartimos Celtigar taking place at the Black Council, but this dude is a butthole. He comes up with, sorry about that, a bunch of different laws and taxes mainly when Rhaenyra finally does take King's Landing, and Rhaenyra taxes the citizens of King's Landing so much that a common curse that's said in King's Landing and in that area for 300 years after that is Rhaenyra's teats. Just kidding. It's Maegor's teats, but Rhaenyra is given the nickname of Maegor with teats because of how cruel her small council is. One of them, Bartimos Celtigar, is the one who comes up with all these different taxes. Like, basically, they're executing a bunch of people because, she's fighting a war, and there's a bunch of green supporters in King's Landing, and she's like, look, I'm going to execute them, and Bartimos Celtigar is like, okay, if you want to execute them, do it in the Dragon Pit, and then charge a tax for people to come and watch, right? And, eventually it gets to the point where everybody's like, God damn it, this bitch is Maegor with teats, and then that becomes a curse. But anyway, Brothel Queens, when she's in power in King's Landing, eventually the idea gets proposed. Oh yeah, one more thing. What's interesting about Bartimos Celtigar is that he starts talking about how the dragon seeds are bastards and how bastard blood is really traitorous. And it's hilarious because Rhaenyra still keeps him around, and like all of her children are bastards except for the ones that she has with Aegon, right? I'm sorry. Except for all of the kids that she has with Daemon, right? But I thought that was interesting because Bartimos is literally like, we got to get rid of these dragon seeds. They're bastards. Bastards have traitorous blood by nature, right? So that was what's interesting. But the Brothel Queens. So the idea gets proposed to Rhaenyra, right, through Mysaria, that she should put the queens, Helaena, and her mother, Alicent, in a brothel, and supposedly they get raped until they get impregnated, and the reason being is because Mysaria says they're obsessed with bastards so much, let's give them bastards of their own. So that's really kind of like, it's left up in the air. Mushroom, what's interesting though is that Mushroom loves Rhaenyra, so really anything that Mushroom says about Rhaenyra you kind of have to believe, because why would he talk shit about her if it wasn't true, right? So, or I guess you could argue the other side of that, because he does love Rhaenyra. Maybe at one point he got scorned by her, and this is why he makes up the mean things, right? So apparently when Maelor's killed, and I talked about Maelor being ripped apart or cut apart by a butcher, or potentially squeezed to death by this redacted lady who just like got her name. She's simple-minded. She got her name by pounding clothes in the river, right? So she ended up getting killed when Aegon II escapes King's Landing, when Rhaenyra takes King's Landing, and he sends Maelor away. It's Maelor and Jaehaera, he sends them away because those are his kids, right? So Maelor ends up getting stopped in Bitterbridge and killed. And then his head gets sent back to Rhaenyra, and according to Mushroom, when Rhaenyra saw his head, she wept. Right? So that's one thing that Mushroom says about Rhaenyra that makes you go, oh, okay, yeah, she's very sympathetic. It also makes you think, why would she put Alicent and Helaena in a brothel to get raped? Well, Mushroom says she did that. Mushroom says she did it, so it'll be something interesting, and I want to ask you all, do you think they're going to sort of include it in the show? And sorry, they said to get broken up into two parts. It was supposed to be all one, but the recording stopped. Or maybe actually I have something on my phone where I could potentially put it as all one recording. So yeah, I'll try to do that. But yeah, do you think that actually happens? And if it did happen in Fire and Blood, do you think they're going to show it on the TV show? That may be too much. Yeah. Okay, and the last thing that I wanted to talk about for this episode of Leaks and Lore, and I haven't really been talking about leaks at all. It's all been lore, but that's because, we're in Season 1. Season 2 is going to start filming hopefully within the next 6 months. So the leaks part will be coming in, and it'll be combined with the lore part. But that's the last topic, like the lore. How far into the Valyrian magic stuff are they going to explore? I want them to talk about rituals that the Valyrian mages performed. If Viserys knows enough information about what Valyria looked like, 100 plus years after it was destroyed, several hundred years after it was destroyed, then how are there not more scrolls and text? Obviously there's images depicting what it looked like, so there must be some information. I want them to have Valyrian rituals and Valyrian magic discussed, and maybe some of those Valyrian scrolls survive all the way down to Aegon the Unlikely. I'm sorry, Aegon the fifth, Duncan Egg, right? I want him to use those scrolls in the tragedy at Summerhall to try to bring back dragons, right? That would be really cool if we have that set up, because we're going to eventually get a Blackfire Rebellion show, or a Duncan Egg TV show, which the Blackfire Rebellions directly play a role into that. So it'd be really cool to see them setting up stuff like that. One thing we know is that when Viserys uses that cane to get around in that mask to cover up, his eyeless face, that's Targaryen relics. That's a family heirloom. It's mentioned in the or inside the episode videos on HBO. Like, that's not something from canon, right? But that imagery of him using that cane to walk up the stairs is from the books. It's just Aegon. That happens to Aegon too. Aegon has a mangled and crippled leg from his battles with Sunfire, and when he ascends the Iron Throne and he's using a cane to do it, that's directly from Fire and Blood. He's going to be using Viserys' cane. I wouldn't be surprised if he also uses his mask, because in the very first battle that he gets in, right, with Meleys and Vhagar, Aegon is so wounded. Remember, he sleeps for like 9 out of every 10 hours for a year, and then that's when Aemon takes over, right? But his armor is fused to his body. Wouldn't be surprising to me if he has these horrific burns on his face and is forced to use a very similar mask, if not the same mask that Viserys used. But all that's besides the point. I think that's why it sparked my intrigue about Valyrian rituals and Valyrian scrolls. It's like, that should be something that should be brought up on the show. It'd be amazing. But thank you for listening. Thank you to all the new patrons that just joined. And this is what you signed up for. Content like this. This will never be uploaded to YouTube. I may discuss it in a video, but thank you for joining, and thank you to everybody who's already been a member. You all rock. Alonat until risas posdare exos daor. Oh yeah, tonight I'll be live, 10:15. Make sure you're there, or you're a square. Just kidding. But yeah, episode 9 is always the most intense episode of Game of Thrones seasons, so I would not be surprised if this episode is just as intense.